Why will I ask you to think about satisfaction? Would your answer be, what does satisfaction have to do with anything? Is it happiness, or joy, or accomplishment? Of course it's not. If it were, then why bother to make a word for it at all? The reason I want to talk about satisfaction is because right now I don't have it. I almost never have. Why does the one thing I crave more than anything else in the world seem to visit me only for the briefest of moments before it is so cruelly pulled beyond my reach again? What does it even mean to be satisfied? I can only find one answer that makes sense. Satisfaction comes from the knowledge that no matter what is behind you, everything that you did, whatever you were doing, was done with the absolute limits of everything you had to offer at the time. There is nothing held back, no retreat, no surrender. There is not even victory. Victory is not satisfaction. Those who claim victory is satisfaction have an imagination so limited it would be difficult for me to hold them accountable for such a belief. Because satisfaction does not exist objectively. You can't touch it. It's intangible. It has no physical form. One could grind every star, planet, and object wondrous and terrifying, and not find a single shred of satisfaction. That means it only exists in our imaginations, an experience of the mind. We made it up, and why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we at our very core choose to give ourselves the one thing a person needs to accomplish even the most simple tasks? Something to do that feels like it's worth a damn. Satisfaction is what it means to have a goal you can clearly see but not reach. A goal that moves and runs from you. It only ever runs slightly faster than you are, but it's always picking up speed. You have no choice in what you want to keep up with, but with it, you learn to go faster yourself, to fight harder, to work harder, to think better, understand more. Fill the treasure house claimed in your golden years full to bursting with what you have become to accomplish more than you could the day before. Be the one of those fools who takes the task of working to live every minute of every day jealously and contemptuously counting down the days which may not be left, never knowing the hour or the day when life will be ended. Be the fool who looks at the world and says, "There is nothing I cannot do," when I remember that success is more important than taking credit for it. Be the fool who learns to live every minute of every day with the intensity that your mind and body are capable of producing inside you. Be the fool who trusts God more than themselves and stops asking God to give them strength one needs. If one believes in God and believes in God is good, then it is assumed he would not abandon you in your hour of need. Do not understand what I say. To ask God for strength is an insult to the strength he has already given you, not an admission of God's lack of empathy. You do not assume he cared enough. If that is true, then we've been given souls, have we not? And to the one who does not believe in God, your job is simpler, but also far less easy. You make the decisions for yourself, with no one but your own conscience to answer to. You must trust that you are to make good decisions with no one else to fall back on, except that what you were able to prepare in advance to the limits of your own imagination. You need all the help you can get. If one speaks of a source of great internal strength taken by faith in something you feel cannot exist, then you would be a fool to say that the strength does not exist. And if that strength is created inside the self, and a thing inside the self is capable of moving mountains, why would you reject such a power in the name of your own distaste for hypothetical conversations? If there is no God, everything is hypothetical. And for that reason, from your perspective, would you leave such a powerful weapon of purpose in anyone's hands but your own? Why should you? You've got to use everything you have, anything you can find. There is nothing else. And to both of you, I say I cannot speak for the existence of a soul given to us by a divine creator. And I cannot say that I have not been able to reach down in the depths of myself and find a limitless supply of energy and power that I can call upon with the full fury of a hurricane to power even the most mundane of tasks. Whether it is the gift of your full potential given to you by God, but fully used by few, or a tool you have forged within yourself from imagination and will alone, I can tell you from where I am standing, right here, in the center of a maelstrom, reaching the highest point in this moment, higher than I have ever reached before in my life, with no regard to how far I have come, that once you reach this moment, you can no longer tell the difference, because the goal is the same. And one path always leads to another. Do not deny your potential to give yourself because you have been not given enough. And do not deny help from others who have found what you have not and are willing to share. They share what they will. You learn what you want. You decide. And what about me? What is my satisfaction? One cannot ever catch satisfaction. But you can chase it so closely for long enough that you are practically living inside it. But living there is not peace, nor is it rest. No, the rest comes after the body's response to growth and change. It makes you tired to grow. Are you going to cry about it? Is that going to stop you from being what you can? One of faith can serve God by living a good life, and one without it still wishes to live a good life. You have reached agreement. Are you such a terrible representative of one of your highest truths? You know that you would talk someone out of agreeing with you because they agree for different reasons. I have my answer, the one that makes sense to me. You decide. There is only one answer for me now. If I cannot have satisfaction, then I will take it by force. Just like our two fighters here tonight. In one corner of the universe, we have first name Trevor, stage name Trevor. Another veteran fighter coming into tonight's contest with the advantage of experience. His intellectual influences include John Locke, the Zermelo-Fraenkel set theory, C.S. Lewis, and Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson! Speaking of satisfaction, good sir, I demand satisfaction. Not from you, but through you. Your potential is my higher power. Let us meet in the arena of intellectual combat. 10 paces of logic at dawn, or at lunch, or the middle of the night, or all three in a row for 2 days. I want it all. I'll take what I can get, and that includes you, Peterson. What do you have to spare among your vast and personal arsenal to address this cocky upstart? Nobody who has somehow climbed to the point just to look you in the eye and say that his idea might be better than yours and believes it to be honest and without boast. You don't owe it to me. You owe it to yourself. You owe it to your satisfaction to find out. You owe it to yourself voluntarily to participate in a harsh combat so you can invest in your future greater opportunities to expand your free will as far as it can go. Does this idea not sound familiar, Dr. Peterson? You owe it to your imagination to test how far it can really go. And if I say you can't imagine the possibilities, then one of us is matched with the other in terms of imaginative power. It is my greatest wish that your spirit is rival to my own. You hide it behind what you must in the public eye, not for fear of the truth, but for fear of hurting the feelings of the one asking you the questions. What can you do if that limitation is removed? Is it a limitation that's been holding you back? It was for me, and nothing holds me back now. Jordan Peterson, will you meet yourself through my competition? I'll stay here. I'll come to you. I'll go somewhere with you. In the sky, underwater, on a roller coaster. There is nowhere we can do this that I will not go. But until then, my life goes on, and while I wait to get your attention, I won't be standing still. And what about Trevor? Has he spent his time wisely, or has he been standing still? He fights. You decide. Trevor, declare your intent to participate. Are you ready? His opponent. In the other corner of the universe, we have a first-time fighter, well-rounded in interest and idea, taking wisdom from psychology and philosophy, personal favorites of mine, religion and sociology. Our fighter goes by many names. First name Sean, aka Sigma 6, aka Sigma Enigma, aka Golden Sigma, and aka the one, the Golden Sigma Six! Ah! Will he leave his condolences for Trevor, or will he be sorry for not taking him seriously enough? He fights. You decide. Sean, declare your intent to participate. Are you ready? It's time for the rules of tonight's contest. Both fighters are engaged in a free-for-all, no-holds-barred battle of wits with the single driving passion to convince the other person they have a deeper understanding of the truth than their opponent. At the end of the match, the fighters will be judged by the following criteria. 1. How well do they understand their own position and explain it clearly? Number 2. How well do they understand their opponent's position when they have stated it clearly? And number 3, how much does their own ego prevent them from trying to find the better answer? They fight, you decide. This is not about being right or wrong, because this stage can only be reached by ones who have realized that no one has all the right answers. And when no one has all the right answers, all that is left is a better answer. They fight, you decide. This is the competition. That is the measures for victory. Tonight's match is set for a time limit of 30 minutes. Fighters are limited only by how much they can effectively communicate their position within that time, and how effectively they can spot weakness in their opponent. Who will drive the discussion more until both of them reach agreement? Will agreement be reached before time run out? Do either of them be able to put their own ego aside to find the truth? They fight, you decide. The topic for tonight's event is, where does our responsibility end regarding what we do not know? The battle begins in 3, 2, 1, fight! We have an interesting topic of conversation this evening. It's a loaded question. All the questions here are loaded. They're meant to be difficult. What is responsibility? What do we know? How much do we know it? Do we know anything at all? You decide. But what will they say? And Sean is fast, very fast. He says intent. He strikes for the heart and says intent. Responsibility for what you do not know could either be nothing or everything. It's also dependent on your action. So Sean does get the first bite, but he really doesn't say much at all, does he, by saying it could be nothing or everything? Sean, what else could it be if it's not nothing or everything? It's got to be one of them, or perhaps not. Is there a deeper layer of your argument? No, Trevor smells weakness and pounces upon it and says that's vague. However, Trevor misses his opportunity to follow up his correct sense for blood and leaves his criticism stand alone without taking control of the conversation, but it's early. I can tell you these things take time to heat up, and Sean is getting warmer. If a person chooses not to act, they have no responsibility to themselves or anyone else if they do not take action. An interesting position. Does that mean that sins of omission do not exist, Sean? What if one stops eating so they die? Are they committing suicide? Or are they just watching their life pass them by? Trevor says that's clarity. Carver is calling for clarity and thinks he's found it. And Sean is quick to say if they choose to take action, their need to acquire knowledge on any given subject or situation could border infinity. Cause and effect could follow the butterfly effect and have major rewards or consequences. It is the individual that needs to weigh matters and decide that they know enough to take action or not. Trevor has hidden truth inside a logical fallacy, very cleverly designed to move the conversation in his way. However, the butterfly effect, by definition, assumes far too much. That is not how logic works. You start with a cause, you get a result. It's 1 to 1 to 1. You cannot start with the cause and have it end anywhere you like. No, that's a logical fallacy. However, the point remains true. The individual weighs the matters and decides if they know enough to take action or not. So Trevor says you have to know what you don't know if you're going to be responsible for it. I wonder what Trevor has to say about that. He's carefully measuring his opponent, having learned the value of strategic strike and careful placement of words in his last match. His experience is showing now, or his respect for his opponent, or perhaps he is struggling to find his beginning. All three of those are difficult to tell apart from each other at this stage. Is he feeling pressure? Or is he feeling confident, about to spring a trap that he's been working on since the beginning of the fight? And Trevor says our responsibility begins with action and ends with direct consequences. No harm, no foul, he says. An argument I've heard before. But what of unintended consequences? Could one do the wrong thing for the wrong reason and unintentionally bring about the best result? Is he responsible for such a thing, even though he intended the direct opposite? If one says yes, then that would also mean if one does not know the correct course of action and makes a mistake and it ends disastrously despite the best of their intentions, that they are responsible for that as well. Is that at the heart of your argument? He says other consequences of action can occur. Now, I might have to accuse Trevor of being vague. What other consequences of which actions? However, his point remains. He says it's actions that speak louder than words and the field of responsibility. And Sean says our responsibility starts and ends with ourselves unless our actions affect others. Now that is interesting. He extends responsibility, or rather removes responsibility of the consequences when it only affects oneself. Does that mean suicide is a valid thing, Sean? If one decides they are to remove their life and it is their choice, would they be correct to say that does not affect others because it is theirs? That's a slippery slope argument, isn't it? Because one could say if that person had even one person in their life that would be sad that they were gone, then they would have a responsibility to that person to either alienate them as a possible connection or to make sure that they aren't the single lifeline that is wishing they would reach out to them. You decide. And Sean says, when our responsibility starts and ends with ourselves, unless our actions affect others. Trevor's response is, but those actions may not be of responsibility. For a concrete example, yes, I would love a concrete example. Can you make it about concrete? Can we build something with it? We are the architects of this conversation, and I want to see some goddamn bricks laid down, and I want to see them fast. Get a move on it, gentlemen. There's 23 minutes left. It's time to stop shaking hands and start fighting each other. You owe it to yourselves. Dig deep and bring your best arguments. Type as fast as you can. Challenge yourself to do more. Sean says it does not affect others. And knowledge, it does affect others, and knowledge is indeed needed. So he recognizes that it is responsible of a person to know what they need to know when they make a decision. That seems like a tall order. How do you know things that you don't know? There could be things around us right now that we have yet to comprehend, affecting everything around us, but we're unaware. How can we give the right knowledge if it is blinded to us by our own lack of perception, John? How could we be responsible for that? Or is it too bad? We are responsible for it and it's not a fair game. That would be a valid argument. And Trevor fires back. We are responsible for what we do, as you say, not just ourselves. He says, cut down a tree to build a house, and you're responsible for the house. I would also say you're responsible for the death of a tree, and the damage of a saw, and the creation of a job to make that saw, and somebody who had to learn to melt metal. So yes, when you cut down a tree, you touch many things, don't you? Not to speak of the animals that called that tree home, or the people that can benefit from the byproducts, the furniture that can be made, the life-giving warmth that can be had, the ash which can serve as fertilizer for crops when it is burned and sprinkled, returning itself to the circle of life to give back once again as it grows from seed and reaches to the sky. Yes, cutting down a tree affects many things. How many of those things are the responsibility of the person swinging the axe? Is that person responsible for trying his best? Or should he stay out of the way? You decide. Sean says he can be a hermit and live on his own and try to not have any effect on myself. He only impacts himself and not has any effect on any other humans. But Trevor says you're not responsible for the next person not having a tree. So now it becomes a matter of possessions. So what is it about possessions that endow someone with responsibility, Trevor? The person with the tree has the tree. The person without the tree has none. How does responsibility tie into that except for one's own drive to have a tree of their own? And Sean says 1 of trillion trees is mire. He accuses Trevor of making an argument lied in minutia. Is he correct? Or is Trevor being too soft? Or is Sean missing the point? You decide. I see them on equal ground right now. They're both measuring each other in ways we cannot understand because it is two minds interacting in two different ways in a very specific interaction, the likes which have not been seen since the dawn of creation. Because no matter how deep you go into history, no matter how far you look, there has only been one Trevor, and there has only been one Sean. Therefore, when they meet, it is unique, as is the meeting between you and every other human being you come into contact with. One of you, one of them, together you grow. Will Sean and Trevor grow? Both of them seem to be searching for the opening. Their defense is tight. Neither one of them has left an opening for the other to pounce on. The discussion has stalled. They're beating each other up. I want more. This is not satisfaction. Both of you stop doing exactly the same level of excellent debate, and one of you get better than the other so I can see blood. I want one of you to beat the other. I do not want you to be equal. Fight. One of you is slightly better than you are right now, and right now you're neck and neck. Who's going to win? Everybody look. Trevor says agreed, that's partly the point, and Trevor finally strikes by grounding reality in agreement and setting the stage for future argument to be made. Yes, Trevor, you have agreed, you have reached a point of decision now. Who will take the advantage and advance the discussion? Sean says there can always be effects of any actions. We can argue about the effect of a heavy footstep or a breath, but these are minor, they are life. Oh, Sean is a little bit slow. Maybe he was typing that and didn't have time to not send it. Yes, Trevor has already accepted his argument and is ready to advance. Sean is caught living in the past, which is the philosophical equivalent of being approached and hit from behind. Trevor, can you take advantage? You seem to be excellent at setting your opponents up for distress, but you seem to lack the killer instinct to take them down. Yes, take the advantage, take the discussion, make your point and attach it to where they are wrong. Then you gain control of reality and advance the discussion further, leaving him no choice but to be left behind or to come with you, with or without his intention. Yes, that is what it means to grow with someone else. Their potential is your higher power. We have 18 minutes left. Who is going to pull out ahead? I'd have to say, at almost the halfway mark, Trevor has the slight advantage, but only slightly. Yes, that killer instinct is the one thing holding him back. But Sean is also not to be trifled with because his defense is as tight as it comes. I have seen him diffuse many a tense situation, keep them conversation on target, letting no distraction sway him from seeking that which is just beyond his grasp. Sean and Trevor. Yes, it's Trevor. What about the transfer of knowledge? He strikes. Yes, the transfer of knowledge. Now the conversation has changed. Trevor gets in first and Sean tries to follow up. Will what he said be consistent with Trevor's point? Trevor has the initiative. He is heard first. Who will be right? You decide. He says, say I know something pertinent, but do not share what I know when it's useful. Partly his responsibility for the result. But he didn't know it was useful. Then it's not at all. Yes, that is a clumsily worded statement, but it has great power and great truth. Yes, you have information that is useful, the right information, the perfect information, the information which solves everybody's problem, but you don't know what is needed of you and therefore cannot offer it. It is not your responsibility. Is it then the responsibility of the person who didn't get to know you as a human being? Is it your responsibility for not having asked them to get to know you as a human being? Does one wish to be responsible, or does one wish to be useful? You decide. Sean fires back actions and interactions with others in the world that are not just day-to-day living, are the important actions that can change the world. Yes, Sean says that some actions have big consequences, and therefore a great deal of responsibility goes with them. So both of them say almost the same thing in slightly different ways. They have not yet excluded the other. They're circling around each other right now, combining two ideas of roughly the same intellectual power, trying to merge them into a single point, which will take us to the next level of this discussion. He says you do not know what they will do with that knowledge if someone is given something they're not ready for. Something that is not wise for them to have. How would you know? They could use it to kill a good person. You would have been better to kept that knowledge for yourself. Better, yes. Responsible. Who knows? I don't know. Trevor says, maybe a little. Trevor, that's a weak statement. Maybe a little describes very little. Do I understand your point? Maybe a little. Or perhaps it's because I understand it completely because there's only a little to understand. Yes, partly, but what? Where? Who? How much? How do we stop it? Where does it come from? Sean says, are you responsible for the actions of others to take with the knowledge you give them? So this is interesting how the conversation seems to have shifted. I feel both our fighters might be holding their egos a bit too tightly because the question is, where does one's responsibility end? Where does one's responsibility end with what they don't know? And it seems like every one of those ones is someone else. What about you, gentlemen? Why don't you speak from experience? Why do you stop putting a man in front of you who is hypothetical, who is but a mere weak imitation of the man who is now before you? If you are capable of having any level of responsibility for anything at all, would not you be the best representative of what you think that is? You don't need hypotheticals if it's what you believe. Say what you believe. What's the right answer for Sean? What's the right answer for Trevor? Trevor says, if you can reasonably offer consequence, you're participating in the result. No, infer. So Trevor is saying if you can predict that something bad will happen and you are complicit, then perhaps you were unwise to participate at all. So he is saying that where your free will has the ability to predict and extend, so too does your responsibility go. Is he saying that if something lies beyond your free will and is not understood as a choice, then it is beyond your responsibility? That sounds like something someone would say. You don't know what you don't know. How can you know to be responsible for it? I don't know. Do you? You decide. And Sean says there is no action. Sean says no action is then responsibility. Sins of omission do exist under this set of rules. Yes, he says knowledge is his right to keep or to give. It's not my responsibility to others. That makes me a slave to others. Yes, Sean is using the word responsibility as a restrictive thing. If one is responsible for another, then one is responsible for the outcome of their life. Sean is correct in saying that he is not a slave. A slave is not the life anyone should live. A life of freedom, a life in pursuit of that which makes a person more is not found in helping people be less than they are by doing for them what they cannot, when instead you could be doing for them what they need the most, which is caring about them as a person and giving them the strength to look their lives in the eye and say, I can do better. I can do that much better today and that much better tomorrow. And then 5 days from now, I'll be this much better. And I don't care how much time you spend. If you do that much better every day, eventually you'll take yourself anywhere you need to go. So what of slavery? And what of service then? If one is not a slave, but one wishes to help others still, then one is a servant. Is he saying the same thing is found in either of those? And Trevor says we're sovereign in the sense we have the right to choose our actions. And Sean fires back, that would make me a slave to gain knowledge, not just for myself, but to gain it for others. And Trevor immediately counters, but that does not alleviate the responsibility to act or to take resoundingly for many actions. So we have the right to give knowledge or not. And Trevor says yes, but we're responsible for either one. Yes, so Sean says we have the right, and Trevor says we have the responsibility, and both of them reach common ground at the same time by agreeing that rights and responsibilities go hand in hand, because how can you be responsible for something you're not rightfully yours? It doesn't make sense. You have to be responsible for something that's yours. You can't be responsible for something that's not. Is someone else's life yours? Is your life your own? You decide, or someone will for you. And they will not be kind. And Trevor, in a very interesting move, gives himself a frowny face. I don't know what that means, but I'm fascinated. Is that a moment of growth? Was there a terrific typo found in his agreement? Did he stumble backwards into success, or does he resent his own phrasing? Or was it a mistake? Did his fingers slip? Is he playing mind games in my imagination? I don't know. And Sean says there is no responsibility to others to act. Those actions might have negative consequences. Once again, I'm a slave to others. It seems like Sean and Trevor are both unwilling to break new ground. They're making the same points they have agreed on. Yes, we're not slaves. Yes, we're responsible for what we do. Yes, we have a choice. And Trevor is having problems. He's a bit distracted. Will Sean take the advantage while he complains about his typo frown god? Trevor, have the gods of combat made light at your expense? Wake up. You can do this. Fight. Both of you fight. What's the next step? Beyond responsibility and ability. What of what we do not know? That is the discussion. Yes, we have the responsibility part discussed. Neither one of you has mentioned what it results to with how we do not know. What can we know about what we don't know? What can we know about what we do? Sean says his responsibilities are to himself, his family, and his loved ones. Another way of saying that he decides what his responsibilities are, and no one decides what his responsibilities are for him. If one is wise, that is the best way to have responsibilities wisely handled. If one is foolish, would not one make foolish choices? Would a responsible choice for a fool be to find someone who is wise and to trust in them? You decide. And Trevor says no expectation to act, but the responsibility is there. It's either responsible or not. You do it or not. It's not compulsory as in slavery. Yes, he is saying that you cannot make a choice without responsibility. I think that is a clear distinction that needs to be made. One is not responsible for a choice they did not make. And Sean says, how am I responsible for others and not their slave? Sean, I accuse you of a lack of empathy in this moment, caught up in the thirst of battle. You are not a slave if you choose to be responsible for others. That is the way. And you have. You said it yourself, your family, your loved ones. You can choose to love everyone, or you can choose to love no one. If you can't choose to love no one, then your love for them has no meaning because you did not choose it. You're not responsible for it if you don't choose who you love. By your own argument, yes, that's what this announcer sees. You decide what Trevor decides. Everyone decides. But if you choose who you love, you're responsible for them, yes? And if you don't, then you're not. You're just a slave to the choice that was made for you. Sean makes an admission. Sean makes an admission that I have made to myself. He says, probably sarcastically, do you want me to be responsible for everyone? That's quite a big deal. Then he's a slave to everyone and have no time for myself or my family. We have lives to live, do we not? All of us. What do we do with that time? We don't have very much of it. We have more time that we spend in the ground, able to help no one, responsible for nothing. Should not our freedom be our highest priority, says Sean. Who can do more? Who can be responsible for more than one who is free? A slave is not responsible for anything, is he? A slave can be responsible for nothing except that which his master says he is in charge of. And even then, the whip is cracked and the chain is pulled far more harshly than it should be, and sometimes unintentionally caught up in the slave's own walking, a restriction to itself. And Trevor says we need to act carefully. And Sean says, what if they don't want my offerings? Yes. What if you do the right thing and people do not recognize it? Is part of doing the right thing being recognized for it? If a tree falls in the woods and lands, does it make a sound? I say the sound is made. I say the good is done, whether someone hears it or not. But what will Trevor say? He says, you are responsible for weighing it and what you choose to do. Trevor cuts to the heart of the issue and says, you validate you. You give your actions meaning. You decide what it means to do a thing. And Trevor says, because they're irresponsible does not mean you're free to join them. To that I say, if there were no fools in the world to keep me company, then I would be alone. Sean says that goes back to my original intent. You act or you do not act, and you're responsible for either, because that is the choice. That is his argument. There's 3 minutes left. This is anybody's game. Who's going to take the conversation further? Both of them prepare for their final assaults, jabbing back and forth, trying to find an opening in the logic that will find common ground, where both of them see the same thing from the same perspective and find the deeper truth beyond that. Where do you agree, gentlemen? That is where you attack. Sean says it is not irresponsible. He's judging whether he wants to give myself to them or not. And don't we all do that in many different ways? Do we not look at ourselves and decide what is most important to us in that moment? And isn't that our right to do what we wish, to go where we want, to live our lives making every choice that is given to us? Let no choice be taken from you against your will. So you are not irresponsible whether you judge to give yourself or not. However, that does not mean automatically that the choices you do make about who to give yourself to are wise. One does not include the other. And what if, coming back to our original topic, one of the things you don't know that you don't know is you could be doing it better? Couldn't we all ask ourselves that question about something? Who says I can't do better? Who's being honest and has breath in their lungs and says in the realm of ideas, I can't improve upon this thing? Is one claiming perfection? Is one claiming the omnipotence of God and hubris to say that this idea is the end of all ideas, that no man will ever find one greater? Sean closes again and says he's free to do what I choose. And it doesn't mean it's being irresponsible. And it doesn't mean he's being responsible. It doesn't mean he's being wise or foolish. It only means that he has ownership of his choice and he's right. And that is a core ingredient when one wishes to do better. Because when one realizes that one can choose, one can always choose to do better. And Trevor makes his claim. He says we're saying the same thing. I think they found common ground. There's 90 seconds to go. It's anybody's game. Who will speak first? Who will make the best point? Who will take the conversation forward? Who will walk backwards, looking back as their opponent leaves them behind? Yes, Sean reaches the agreement. There's 70 seconds left to go. Both of them are typing frantically as they try to figure out which one of them has the better answer. Can they hit enter in time? Inquiries and comments and questions and points made after time expired will not be counted and will not be considered part of the official conversation. Maybe they got there, but they got there too slow. Better luck next time with 48 seconds left to go. Who is typing faster? One of them needs to make a point and quickly, because both of them still have time to lose depending on what the other person says. 35 seconds. Sean says semantics. Semantics, what about them? Yes, Sean, take it and run. You've got 30 seconds to make your case. Yes, give us your final point. Move the conversation forward. It's time to challenge yourself and dig deep. 20 seconds are left, Trevor. Have you got something? What have you been working on? Have you been using your time wisely? What did you learn after the last match? Have you gotten better? Have you gotten faster? Do you realize how to close the event now? Did you learn from what happened last time? Did you grow? And time expires. Trevor comes in at the end. His conversation ending statement will be read, but not counted in the scoring. He says, I still think that it may end close to home. There's an interesting discussion to be had about the further limit of responsibility. And what if you have a wider scope of knowledge? Thank you, Trevor. Thank you, Sean. Both of you have fought well. You gave it your all. I saw it. I could hear it in your arguments. You were trying to advance, and both of you did. Two men who started disagreeing with each other at a fundamental level have reached common ground on a higher plane. This idea has gone far, and it could go farther if you two meet again to discuss it another time, if both of you are wise. But now it is time for me to make my decision. This evening, how well they understand their own positions by explaining them clearly. I choose Trevor. How well do they understand the position of their opponent when their opponent is being clear? I choose Sean. How much does their own ego stop them from trying to find a better answer? Tonight's winner, by split decision, with a score of 2-1, is Trevor. Goodbye.